Okay, today what we're going to do is look at um, a photograph of an artwork that we want to crop for printing. And it's important, I'm going to probably repeat this a couple times, it's important to know that when we say we're going to print it, that to know where we're going to print it. And the big difference is whether we're printing it on campus to inkjet printers or whether we're having it commercially printed to either inkjet printers or to commercial lithography or lithographic kind of printing, or I guess we could also be talking about silkscreen printing. Each of those different ways require some slightly different specifications or adjustments to be made on how we save the file. So in this case, I'm going to be talking about saving this one so that the individual passages or sections, selections that we make, that we're going to print them on campus to the Epson inkjet printers. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is crop the image. So I click the cropping tool. It's these two angles here, that tool. And if you don't see it, it's because it might be hidden behind an option tool. And so first, simply look to see if that tool is in the toolbox. If it's not, it might be behind one of the tools that are visible. And we know that because all of these tools have a tiny, tiny little white triangle in the lower right-hand corner of its icon. And that indicates that there are other options hiding behind it. So if I can't see the cropping tool, it may be because I see the slice tool, or I see the perspective crop tool, or the slice selection tool, one of those that prevents me from seeing the cropping tool. So first look for the crop tool. If you don't see it, then you have to look by just pressing on a tool and see if the one you're looking for is located behind it, which in this case it is, the crop tool. So I just select it there. And then by default, the entire image has crop marks or a crop bounding box around it. And we know that because of these heavy white lines in each of the four corners, and as well as in the middle of the horizontal and vertical lines of the box. So I'm just going to grab a corner and pull it in and crop to the size that I want. And then I can move the image around within that box to get the part that I want. I should say ahead of time that normally you're going to take a picture of the artwork very, very close to the final size that you want to print. You're probably not going to be cropping it as much as you see me doing it on this one, but at any rate, it's going to be to your advantage to take the picture of the selection that you want to print. Take that picture with a little extra, a little larger, so that you can do the final cropping here in Photoshop. Okay, so other than that, what you would be doing would be exactly the same. I'm just saying that you should start out with a photograph that's closer to the final size in the beginning. Okay, or closer to the final composition, I should say. So this is what I want. I can just double click this. It now crops or cuts away the excess part of the image. And so it's cropped to the composition that I want and in the position that I want it to be. I already know that this image, the information, because it is black and white, I can't do a whole lot of adjusting of its brightness, contrast, or tonal values here. I'm going to do a similar thing on a color image in just a minute. And so I'm just going to say that at this point, I think normally you would probably also want to do a little bit of adjustment of value and contrast and tone. But on this one, I already know that there's not a lot of information there, so I'm not going to even go through that. But I am going to go through the step after that, which would be saving it in the correct file format at the correct resolution and in the correct color space. So what we want to do is set up the color space first. And this is one of the big differences between printing on campus or printing to commercial printing, or having it commercially printed, I guess I should say. So I don't know why this is true, but Epson wants or does better printing if the files are in RGB color space. Now, this is exactly the opposite of what all other forms of printing prefer. But since we're printing to the Epson inkjet printers on campus, we want this to be an RGB color space. So to do that, I need to look, and I always have a hard time remembering where this is, but it's image mode, and it's checked on RGB right now. So great, I don't have to do anything. It might be in CMYK, and then it's highly unlikely it would be in any of these other ones, but you want it to be in RGB color space, even though, in this case, the image itself is primarily black and white or grayscale. But again, because we're printing to an Epson color printer, we want it to be in RGB color space. And I guess while I'm here, I should say, if we were going to have it commercially printed, we would change it to CMY color space. All right, so we're going to leave it at RGB. Now we want to make sure that it is at the size that we want it to be, and also at the resolution that we want it to be. So we're going to go to image, and there's two things here that look similar. One is image size, and one is the canvas size. And the canvas size right now is, we don't have to do anything to that. We're going to go, so we're going to go to image size. And it tells me what the size of this image is right now. So at the moment, it is 4 inches by 6 inches, and its resolution is 144. So typically I want to print, if I'm going to print this out, I certainly want it larger than 4 inches by 6 inches. And the resolution needs to be higher, regardless of its physical size. So the way I need to do that, first of all, when you open this, the image size window up, I think for most of us at this point in the game, you're probably going to want the measurements in inches. So to the right, if it comes up, for example, in points or something else here, then just simply change that one to inches. You want this chain link to be as it is now. You don't want it to be like that without the lines. So click it so that the lines go from the link up and over to width and down and over to height. That means that when you change either the width or the height, the other one will change and you'll keep the same proportions. If you click on the chain link and there, and now change one of these, it won't change the other one. Therefore, you'll be distorting the image, and we don't want to do that. So we're leaving this intact, and we're going to change one of them to the size that we want it to be. Let's say I want the width to be 12 inches. So when I type this in, 12, notice the height also changed proportionally. Okay, so that's the size I want it to be. Now the resolution, I want that to be, for the Epson printers, I want it to be 300 pixels per inch. And then what that's doing, since I'm now making the picture larger than it started out with, the computer is going to resample the information that it currently has and supply the information on it. Essentially, it's guessing, it's interpolating, or resampling is what Photoshop calls it. And the resampling, the way it resamples, we have a couple of choices of how that might be done. And since I was going up in size, remember I started out with around, I think, 4 inches here, and I changed it to 12, so I'm going up in size. So I have a couple of choices here, and by default, I think it went to preserve details, which is the best option for enlargement. I also have preserve details 2.0. I have bicubic smoother, which is also for enlargement. I have sharper, which works for, if I, let's say I started out with a 12-inch image, but I wanted to reduce it in size to 4 rather than what I'm currently doing. Then I would want to pick one for reduction. And if I had a lot of gradients in there, I might pick this. If I had hard edges like flat color areas, then I might pick this one. And to be honest, I'm not quite sure what bilinear is the best for. I've never ever used it, but it doesn't mean it isn't good. I just don't know. I can't say what particular thing that's best for. So in our case, we really want to see the differences between these three right here. We have three options that will give us slightly different results for enlarging this image. And so I'm going to leave it on the first one here and say, okay. And so it's going to do its thing. And now we see what the image looks like. And it looks to me like it captured some detail along the edges pretty well. It captured subtlety and difference of gradation. But I'm even going to zoom in closer. I don't see any pixelation or jaggedy kinds of edges. So that's good. I'm going to come all the way out for the entire image and look at it again. And so I think that's a pretty good one, you know, with that first choice. On the other hand, what I want to do is I'm going to undo that and go back to image size. So I just did Command Z there to undo it. Going back to image size. Notice I'm back to the same settings again. So I'm going to change this to 12. This is going to be 300. But instead of using that first one, I'm going to go down to the second option and OK it and see if I get a better result or not, or if I can even notice a difference here. And I don't really notice a difference here on screen. And it's quite possible that on some images you will not see a difference on the screen. You wouldn't see it until you printed it out. But I think it's a pretty good indication that if you can't see pixelation or jaggedy edges, or you lose smooth gradation where there's shading, then you're probably okay either way. And then we had a third choice there. So I would do the same thing. I would undo this and go back to the step before we did this particular enlargement and pick the third one. And then I would look at it and see if it made a difference. And then ultimately I would pick the best one. Okay, so I can go forward to the next step, I'm just going to say this is the best of the three, even though I only did two. I'm going to say this is the best version. I know that it is RGB. I know that it's the size I want it to be in the end. And I know that it is at 300 pixels per inch in terms of its resolution. So that's all good. Now I just need to save it in a format and a name that works for me. So because I'm going to probably print several different versions of this large canvas. So so I'm going to print several passages from it. So I want to name this in a way that all of the passages relate to one another. I don't want to give them completely different names because then it'll be hard for me to find them. And I also want to give them a name that associates them with one another. Okay, so and also in the file format that allows me to print it the way I need to print it. So I'm going to go to File, Save As. And in here, I'm going to say, I'll say passage number 1. And it's a Photoshop file, which will be good for me because that means it's not compressing any data. It's not, it's going to contain everything that it possibly can. Another file format, if I do some other adjustments that could work for me here, would be a TIFF, T-I-F-F. That's a high quality file where I can control the amount of compression, or a JPEG, which is also a file format that you've probably used a lot, but maybe didn't know why. But it's also an image format. It can cause more loss of information. So between those two forms, other forms other than the native Photoshop file, the TIFF or the JPEG, one is referred to as a lossy kind of compression file format. That would be the JPEG. It loses some information. The TIFF is a lossless form of compression where it doesn't lose information. So obviously you don't want to lose information because then that's going to ultimately affect the quality of the image. It's going to degrade it. And the one that is no compression whatsoever, of course, is the native file format. And since we're going to be printing these here on campus, then we know that we can open it up again in Photoshop without any problem. So there's no reason to change it to another file format. If we were going to commercial printing, then we need to find out from that printer, that person, what file format they would prefer. And they will either tell us that on the phone or email, or it might be on their website that gives us some specifications or some requirements of how they want the file saved. And then we would make those changes. Okay, so in our case, we've already done, again, the size, the resolution, the file format. Right now is a Photoshop file, and then we're naming it, knowing that we're going to, in a way that is going to allow us to add other passages, I guess, from the same canvas. The last thing on this, I would say, is where are we saving it? So I would put these all in its own folder. So down in the lower left-hand corner, if I'm at a location where I originally got the picture from in the first place, then it's going to show up in there. But I want to create a new folder inside here that contains all these passages. So I'm going to say new folder. I'm going to call it passages. Say create. Here's this. The first one's going to go there. I say save, and then this can be okay. So we have that one in there.